Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we've been working through a renovation of this 1956 Calcraft. Wait. That's not right. There it is. This 1956 Calcraft. You gotta watch your step. Okay, but in all seriousness, we are working through a renovation of this 1956 Calcraft. It's gotten to the point where everything's torn apart and we're waiting for some work to be done on the trailer frame to get it nice and straightened out so we can rebuild on top of it. So in the meantime, I thought I would talk about something that I've certainly said many times as being an invaluable tool in this process, and something that I've gotten a reasonable amount of questions about, from what program is that to I have no idea how to use that. That would be incredible though. I thought I would talk a little bit today about, what SketchUp is, how I use it for this process, but also how I take measurements of the campers that I rebuild, and also how I, draw those initial hand sketches and get them consistent and accurate. What is SketchUp? Well, SketchUp is a free online drafting program. You just go to the website and you can work right there in your browser. It's not a professional drafting program, but there is a paid version if you want to get really fancy with it. You don't need that for what we're going to do though. You can label your dimensions in there. You can print out drawings showing certain parts of it so that you can use that as essentially directions to rebuild your camper. Unfortunately, they don't have a mobile version that works very well. You can pull it up on your phone, but it's really difficult to navigate with touch. I really suggest that you do this with a desktop computer, or not a desktop, but an actual computer that has a keyboard and a mouse. So you've seen me take apart a camper and strip it all down. Well, in that process, I always like to take copious amounts of measurements. And that's absolutely critical if you're going to make a 3D design. It's absolutely critical if you're planning on doing this, even without making a 3D design. But the nice thing about SketchUp is that if you have all these measurements, you can go in and you can start to draw a box and then just type in the coordinate or type in the dimensions of it, and it will make it that size for you exactly. So one thing that I've found in most of these campers is they'll be made out of 1 or 2 or maybe 3 different sizes of wood. So if you look at your wall, you'll find your studs are mostly, say they're 1 by 2. And then you might have a few that are an actual 2 by 2 or something like that. You can just mark down which boards are which size so that you don't have to measure every single individual board when you make your drawing. Okay, so this is my drawing for one wall, and I made a little key up in the corner that tells me the different dimensions of the board. And so the ones that I colored in blue are one dimension, the ones that are just a blue outline or another, and then the ones that are filled in with red are a third size. And I like to use these little blue and red pencils for that because it's really quick to switch back and forth. You could also do it with a like one of those pens that has the 4 different colors. As I'm making this drawing, I start from one area that I can kind of build out from. So in this case, I started here with the wheel well, because it was one big solid piece of wood that I could pretty well measure and know what size it is. And so I did that, and then I started at this piece on the side, and I said, okay, it went up this side, and then how far apart is the next piece, and how long is it, and then, okay, there's this piece, how long is that, and so on and so forth. And you kind of work your way out away from that sort of starting point. And sometimes you might find that, oh shoot, now I'm out here and I don't really know what to measure off of. You just have to figure out some way to position all of these things. And so sometimes you just have to kind of think it through a little bit. But like I said, I color code these different boards so I know they're all the same size, so I don't have to keep measuring over and over and over. And then you really just have to measure the distances between them. That's far more important than measuring each individual piece. So one question that I know a lot of people have asked me about, and a lot of people have commented and said, I can't wait to see you do this. They want to know how I make that outer curve. I think everybody sort of assumes that there's a way to measure for it, and when you do a 3D model, you come up with something really precise. And there probably is, but that's not how I've done it. That's not how I did it on the last one. I look at how that curve was built, and in our case it's built up with 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch plywood that's been cut to a certain width and then just layered and glued and nailed together. And so I look for where it starts and how it ends, and then the assumption is that if all of these little wall studs are in the right spot, if you just wrap that around it, it's going to make that exact curve. Now granted, there's a few things that might make it not exactly work out that way, but it should be close enough. Now if you're planning on reusing your skins, you're going to probably need better than just close enough. But one thing you can always do is to put it on there and start making this curve and see what happens. And I mean, it'll be built up, 1.5 inches or so, and you can come back with a belt sander and sand it back down to where you need it to be. Just FYI. It's always easier to take stuff away than it is to add stuff. That concept might be a little difficult to understand about it just sort of naturally making the curve when you put it on there. But I think when you see me do it, it'll make more sense. I'll be excited to see me do it because I'm assuming this is going to work. And we all know what happens when you assume. So you do one side and then you do the other side. Same way. Pretty simple. Anything that you don't have a reference point for, like if it's completely rotted away, you're going to have to make it up. And that's where having that 3D model is going to really help, because you can put boards in here and there and you can adjust their length and, adjust it until you need to. So I'm not really going to talk exactly about how to use SketchUp because there's so many tutorials on YouTube. If you want to know how to do this, spend some time on YouTube and you can definitely figure it out. It's not that hard. The very kind of basic thing I'll say about using SketchUp is what you're going to do is you're going to make a bunch of blocks in there. And you make a block by making a rectangle of a certain size, and you kind of click and start to draw, and then you can type in the dimensions for that rectangle, and then you use the push-pull tool and you grab that flat rectangle and you stretch it out to whatever length you need. So then you have a box. So if you've put your dimensions in right, that box is essentially representative of a piece of wood. What is this piece of wood but a box? So you draw a rectangle and then you grab it and you pull it out this long, and there's your board. So one important thing about when you're making those boards is that once you've done it, you want to select them all and right-click on it and make it a group, because if you don't do that, when you start drawing the next board, if it's touching it, it's going to stick to it. And so now, instead of having one rectangle that's next to another rectangle, you now have an L-shaped thing. And that's not really what you want, because then you can't just move this piece around easily. So you just highlight what you did, make it a group, draw your next thing, highlight it, make it a group, wait for all the motorcycles to go away. So then you have all your boards are in separate groups, and you can move them around as you need to. You can play with their length if you need to, and it makes it really easy to hide certain boards so that you can see other things. So what I do is I make separate groups for kind of the different components. Like the wall will be its own group, the deck will be a group, the trailer frame will be a group, and that way if I want to, let's say I want to see the trailer frame itself, I can just highlight all the groups on top of it and just work with the frame there. So super useful for that. And, it also lets you kind of remove the part that you're not currently working on, look at that, frame or the decking or whatever it is, and draw in your dimensions, print out that image so you can then go and take it to the job site, and work on it there. So the other thing you'll be wanting to use SketchUp for, especially if you're doing these complete rebuilds like this, where you're tearing apart all the walls and you're going to put them back together. You want the walls to be the same, I guess, right? I think so. You don't want one wall to be, 2 inches longer than the other one, because that's going to make it really awkward when you try to put trailer skin over the roof. And if you want to make any changes to the basic design, it's much easier to do that in a three-dimensional program that's going to, maintain all your relative measurements. Because I can change something on a piece of paper and it doesn't necessarily, I can say, oh, well, I'm going to make this piece this dimension, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fit where I think it is, because my drawing might not be to scale. So in the program, you can change, the length of a board somewhere, and you say, oh, I'm going to make this, 5 feet instead of, 4.5 feet. Well, you do that, and then you say, oh, okay, well, that's not going to reach all the way to there, so I'm going to need to add another piece here. And the other thing you could do is, especially when you're putting in like your wall panels, you can make sure that there's going to be where two panels meet, you can make sure there's a stud behind it, so you've got something to actually attach the free edge of those panels to. And so it makes the whole process just so much easier to kind of plan through. You also can make a very exact wood list from this. You used to say, oh, well, plan for what you need and then add 20%. Well, at the cost of wood now, adding 20% more boards or something is it can be quite a bit expensive. So by having a three-dimensional model, by knowing dimensions of all the piece of wood that you need beforehand, you can hopefully save yourself some money. I feel like we did a pretty accurate job in our last camper with our wood orders, and I didn't wind up with much left over. In fact, aside from a few little scrappy pieces, I don't think I have hardly anything left over from our Playmore rebuild. So you can take all your measurements off your actual camper sitting outside, and you can build your two walls in SketchUp, and then you can move them right up next to one another and see if they actually do match. And if they don't, you can make some changes at that point to decide which one's the correct wall, or if you want to split the difference. But if you've done a good job of taking measurements, you should be pretty close to the same. I hope you found this useful. I know that I talk about SketchUp a lot. I show it every now and then. I think it's really an invaluable tool. I know some woodworkers out there would say like a CNC machine is an invaluable tool now. But even if you have a CNC machine, you got to start out with a model. I would say the model is the invaluable tool. And fortunately, this time it's a free tool. Good luck with your project. Good luck with my project. New videos come out every Sunday, so make sure and like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.